Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. Gothic Remake has a pretty decent amount of different weapon types.
Let me guess, it isn't enough?
Around 8 or 9 to be more precise, but in this video we're going to take a closer look at all melee weapon types. I just finished a full playthrough of the game on hard difficulty, and I'm also working on a full review. But in the meantime, I played around with all melee weapons just for fun and to see which one performs the best in general. So we're going to talk a little bit about all melee weapon types, their strengths and weaknesses, and which one you should consider to use on your playthrough. Before we dig deeper into this topic, just keep in mind that most of these weapons are fully functional, which means that you can do well in majority of the fights with whatever weapon you choose. But they are definitely not the same, and while some weapons are good for something, others are amazing for everything. Some are good for early and the mid game, but not so much for the late game, or vice versa. I'm also going to rank these weapon types in a tier list, just for fun. Starting with one-handed swords, the first actual melee weapon you can find in the game. Well, the pickaxe is technically the first melee weapon you can find, and that's a two-handed axe, but it barely qualifies as a weapon.
Don't settle for the first pickaxe you can find though. They're heavy and slow. Use them as a last resort.
Anyway, one-handed swords are just okay in general. They actually start off as a pretty bad weapon type when you don't have one-handed skill trained at all. Stabbing attack doesn't have much of a range, which was very disappointing. If this attack had more range in the beginning, it would probably be a much better option for the starting weapon. The quote-unquote slam attack is actually decent, and you can effectively kill most smaller creatures like this. Swords are faster than axes and maces, so that's why this attack is quite useful in the beginning. Left and right combo only becomes usable with one-handed train skill and master skill level later on. It's much better to stick with the slamming attack and stab in the beginning than trying to hit left and right, because you're actually not doing a combo, until you increase your one-handed skill to trained at least. But even with the master level one-handed skill, I didn't see many improvements for this weapon type. One-handed and two-handed swords are weapons with the highest amount of combos you can perform. You can do at least 3 different combinations depending on how you press attack buttons. I'll talk about this in greater depth in my full combat guide, so stick around for that. I mean, sure, some of these combo animations are very nice, but that doesn't make them more useful, or I just failed to find the use for them in combat. Even so, this weapon type is decent, you can use it effectively in early, mid and the late game. It's the fastest weapon you can use, so that counts for something, but it doesn't have a lot of stun damage. It's very flashy, but like I said, I don't think it's nearly as effective as some other weapon types we're going to mention here. So I will put one-handed swords in the B category. They are definitely usable and you can do well with them, but they are not the best. Master skill level makes them look really cool, and if you're quick on the dodge mechanic, you can kill most enemies with poke and run tactic. Then we have one-handed maces, a very common weapon type you're going to find through the entire game. Maces are the slowest of the bunch, which makes the already slow combat in the beginning very freaking slow. So that instantly makes them less usable and more frustrating, but their special attack can stun enemies easier than swords, especially when you get at least the first level up for one-handed skill. You can send most enemies on the ground with the uppercut attack, and then use the slam attack for a decent little combo. It's not actually a combo, by the way. You don't benefit from the damage increase like you would from an actual combo. Combos are only those little flashing attacks that you can see on the weapon, and as long as they flash, you're doing a combo. That's the easiest way to explain it. But stay tuned for my full combat guide that's supposed to come out soon. I'll explain everything combat related in that video. Anyway, maces are just way too slow for my liking, but if you're very careful and defensive, it might be a good weapon for you. The stun damage should not be ignored as well. Maces become much faster on the master skill level and way more usable, so they actually scale quite well with one-handed skill, which makes them an effective weapon type in the mid and the late game, so they get bonus points for that. Maces have the least amount of combos out of all 3 one-handed weapon types. That can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you like to play. If you like to keep it simple, it's probably a good thing, and they're effective at killing most enemies, so maces are fine in general. So I'm going to rank them a bit higher than one-handed swords. I think they're a bit better choice than one-handed swords with higher skill level later in the game, but they kind of suck in the beginning. Which brings us to one-handed axes. One-handed axes are simply amazing in this game. Even when your skill level is the lowest, you can still easily deal with weakest enemies and human NPCs. The special uppercut attack, as I like to call it, will stun most smaller enemies, even with the very first one-handed axe you can find in the game and with no strength increase or skill levels. This is the best move you have in the beginning, and even later in the game can be very useful for stunning enemies. Human enemies not so much, but the second special attack, which is like a slam that you can do, has an amazing range, which will help you a lot against human enemies, or against anything as a matter of fact. Even with the untrained skill level, learning how to use this attack will help you a lot in combat. So both special attacks with one-handed axes are very useful from the very beginning of the game. These attacks only become even better as you level up your one-handed skill. You get a little jump and even more range, which almost allows you to abuse enemies with this attack, especially if you have the dodge roll skill unlocked. And even with the withered axe, you can still manage to kill most enemies with this attack because of the range, and of course the high strength stat. Even so, this is the only one-handed weapon that can do this. The insane range on the jumping attack with the master skill level will make you ignore most other weapons in the game, it's that good. That being said, I wasn't able to find some extremely powerful endgame one-handed axes, so that's why I have to take some points away from it, but I will still rate this weapon type very high on the tier list. I would rate it as a high A. It's an exceptional weapon type that I highly recommend to anyone. Before we move on and start talking about two-handed weapon types, I want to talk a little bit about fist fighting. Yeah, Gothic Remake has a brand new fighting feature which allows you to use your fist in the fight. It's a pretty cool feature, but how viable is this playstyle actually? Well, let's find out. From the very beginning of the game you can try to use your fist to win fights, but the untrained skill level is barely usable. It sucks, and you should not try to play like this, because pretty much all weapons will do a lot better in the beginning. This will change a lot when you increase your fist skill by doing a little quest for Yan that you can find close to the new camp. By doing this you will unlock most fighting perks like with one-handed weapons like parrying, doing crits, cancelling animations and so on. With high enough strength stat and level 2 skill, you will deal more than enough damage to kill enemies like this. But combos and attacks for fist fighting are not as effective compared to all other normal weapons. Special attacks like the slam and the uppercut attack are also less effective compared to same attacks from normal weapons. That being said, I didn't find a way to push this skill past level 2, so maybe if there is another skill up, this playstyle becomes even better, I'm not sure. You can still handle most enemies like this if you want, but I don't see a reason to play like this. Unless you really like fighting without weapons, then sure, you can make it work. But I would only put fist fighting in the C category. Now let's talk about two-handed weapon types.
Well, put a spear up my arse and call me a bloodfly.
Staves are quite possibly the first two-handed weapon type you're going to find in the game. Again, except the pickaxe that I mentioned before. As some of you already pointed out in my beginner combat guide, staves were actually present even in the original game, but they had same animations as all two-handed weapons. This time around, staves have a completely new set of animations, but they are still related to two-handed weapon skill. You can get your hands on a staff very early on if you know where to look or who to beat up.
Fantastic way to make some friends around here.
This weapon is actually one of the best, if not the best, starting weapons you can use. That's because of the two special attacks, which are both long-range stabbing thrusts. Even before you level up your two-handed weapon skill, you can effectively use these two stabbing attacks and keep enemies at range. Not only that, but you can also kill them with a few hits, which obviously depends on your strength as well. Again, all of these clips you see are from my playthrough on the hard difficulty, so everything should be even more effective on lower difficulties. You can almost spam these two attacks and win most fights, which is not something you can say for the majority of other weapons. That being said, left and right attacks are almost unusable with this weapon type even on the highest skill level. They are just way too slow and clunky and you can't even combo them properly. So you should forget that these attacks even exist. When you push your two-handed skill to the max, you'll be able to combo your two stabbing attacks up to 3 times. Combining these two stabbing attacks might seem like you don't even have to stop the combo. The thing is, the combo always stops for all weapons when you see that little visual effect and you no longer see the white flashing effect on the weapon, which happens here as well if you pay attention, but you're able to continue your combo very fast after that. But there is a big problem with this weapon type. It falls off drastically in the mid and the late game. I was not able to find a lot of these weapons at all, so maybe there are a few more that could be worth using later on, either from crafting or just finding it somewhere in the open world, I'm not sure. But even if that's the case, these stabbing attacks are not as effective later on, especially in crowded fights. It can be a decent weapon for one-on-one fights, but you can say the same for pretty much all weapon types, especially if you learn how to parry and riposte. I couldn't even find a staff with decent amount of damage that could encourage me to use them in mid and late game, but because it's a very useful beginner weapon, I'm going to put it in the B category, right behind one-handed swords. They are certainly better than swords in the beginning, but they fall off quickly later on. So what about two-handed swords, my favorite type of weapons in every game ever? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Even with the untrained skill level, I started using two-handed swords with pretty decent results. But it's not because two-handed swords are amazing as a weapon type. You can find the high damage two-handed swords early on, and you only need to increase your strength enough to use it. The damage from the light two-handed swords that you can easily get from the Brotherhood NPCs make it an amazing starting two-handed weapon. Even though I had level 2 one-handed skill, I still used two-handed swords a lot more, even with the untrained skill. As for the weapon itself, the beginner skill level is just okay. Stab attacks can be very useful, as well as the slam. But just like one-handed swords, the stabbing attack just lacks range. It doesn't suck like the stab from one-handed swords, but it's still not great. Positioning and weapon range in this game is way more important than you might think, until it doesn't. So if you have high enough strength stat and you get a light two-hander at least, you should try to use it. When you increase the two-handed skill, all of these attacks start looking very cool, and some of them can be very useful against certain enemy types. I like to start with the stab and continue with the left and right combo, which is a decent opener against most small and medium enemies. It doesn't work that well against humans and orcs though. The combos are decent and it's the fastest two-handed weapon, but it doesn't have a lot of stun damage, which becomes obvious in the mid and the late game. It's also pretty decent for fighting multiple enemies at once. But overall, this weapon type is a mixed bag, like I said before. Until you get the strongest weapon in the game, which is related to the story, but that doesn't really count. So I would place two-handed swords in the high B category. I like them more than one-handed swords and maces. Wow, that B category is kind of getting crowded. Don't worry, we'll balance that out pretty soon. Which brings us to Orc Weapons. Orc Weapons are basically used as two-handed weapons, but they have a separate skill. You'll start finding these weapon types a bit later in the game, or even in the early game if you're able to kill an orc. They usually come as a two-handed axe or a two-handed mace, basically. These weapons are almost unusable without Orc Weapon skill. They are just way too slow and clunky without it. And don't worry about the skill itself, you will unlock the high skill level as long as you follow the main quest eventually. But that's the thing though, even with the high skill level, Orc Weapons kind of suck. You'll instantly learn the high skill level from a little quest I don't wanna spoil, but the skill is very underwhelming. These weapons don't have anything special, they just behave like slow and clunky two-handed weapons. They have one redeeming factor I guess, but I don't think it's good enough to justify using these weapons. And that will be the high amount of stun damage. You can send to the ground most enemies with the slam attack, which can be very useful, especially in one-on-one fights. It's quite possibly the best weapon type for stunning enemies. But it's just way too slow and clunky, and you probably get hit a lot if you try to use them in most fights. The highest skill level is equally disappointing. Left and right combo is basic and slow, while those two special attacks are basically like one-handed axe attacks, but even slower. The damage these weapons can deal is actually decent, but nothing amazing. At least I haven't found a very high damage dealing orc weapon, but that would hardly change anything. I would only recommend trying to use them if you really like the aesthetics of big warhammers. That being said, I'm putting them into D category. It's easily one of the worst weapon types in the whole game, as far as I'm concerned. I would like to see them rework these weapons with some special attack animations and more useful attacks in general. It also sucks how you have to wait quite a bit for this weapon type to even be remotely useful, and by then you already have way better weapons available, so yeah, kind of sucks. Hence the D rating. We saved the best for the last. Before I even tell you why two-handed axes are so freaking good, let me show you first. Combos are limited to a certain amount of hits for every weapon in this game, except for two-handed axes for some reason. So this is the only weapon type in the game where you can do endless left and right combo. Well, technically staves have something similar, but like I said before, the combo actually stops for that weapon. With two-handed axes it doesn't stop at all, as long as your timing is on point. This is the main reason why two-handed axes are so good, and I managed to kill even the toughest enemies in the game like this, on the hardest difficulty. Later on in the game you'll need to be able to tank a few hits from the enemy, but that won't stop your combo. And again, all of these clips are recorded on the highest difficulty, so it's going to be even easier if you're playing on lower difficulties, which makes the two-handed axes the most OP weapons in the game, as far as I'm concerned. I can't remember if you can do this endless combo when your skill is lower than Master. I know for sure that you can't do it with the untrained skill level, but you can try it out with the second skill level for the two-handed weapons. If it doesn't work, just save up some learning points right away for the Master skill level. Come to think of it, that's probably the only drawback for the two-handed weapons in general. You'll have to wait quite a bit until one of those NPCs from the camps are even willing to teach you this skill. Another small drawback of two-handed axes is the range. Two-handed axes that you can find in the beginning might be very short, and later in the game, or if you know where to look, you'll find a much bigger axe, even in the beginning. The thing is, even the shortest two-handed axe can still be very effective with this combo, as long as you get very close to enemies, which you'll do anyway. Other attacks with this weapon are fine, especially the big slamming attack, but you probably won't even use them that much. Left and right combo with this weapon is just extremely powerful, if not completely OP. Using this weapon is the closest you can get to combat from the original game, where you could just spam left and right attacks and, with a bit of luck, kill everything. It's not a very engaging combat style though, and you will still die quite a bit. But I think that most elite and boss enemies are just too slow to react to this attack, and I actually wish this will change in some future patch. But overall, two-handed axe is the only weapon type in the game that I would put into S category. S as in stupidly OP.
That's right. This little freshie will kick your ass all the way to Nordmar.
And that would be it, I guess. Putting aside everything I just said, you should probably always use the weapon which deals the most damage, which you can equip. We covered all melee weapon types, and I think I was pretty fair with the list. Just keep in mind that all of this is from my personal experience with the game, so it's not a definitive list. But I hope you found some nice tips in here, which would help you with the game. Stay tuned for my full review and some more videos about Gothic Remake. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.